Opal May Howell was born April 19, 1920 in Wheatland, Wyoming, to Riley and Flossie Howell. Times were hard in the 1920s for the young Howell family. After searching long and hard through the Northwest, Riley finally found steady work in Havre, Montana. Flossie packed up her children, Opal, Gladys, and Bill, and boarded a train to join her husband. In Havre, Flossie located the owner of the mine, who obligingly found a room for her and her children, while he sent for Riley to come in from the mines. The family soon settled together in a small farm out of town, rented by them by Riley's boss. Farms were small back then, as there wasn't as many modern machines as there were today. Riley continued to work in the mines and Flossie continued to have children. Riley would be laid off during hard times at the mine, but would always find a new job. Living in a prairie town in Montana was hard. During the 1920s, America experienced a great drought that extended from the far south into Canada. The land was dry and the winds were unkind, blowing away much of the topsoil. Life was hard for Opal as the oldest. Her older brother, Willard, had died at the age of 1. She milked the cows, gathered the eggs, tended the crops, and did the chores her father assigned her while he was away working at the mines. So many accidents happened in the mines. Riley worked with explosives, so it was even more dangerous. "If something happens to me, you have to take care of your mother, sisters, and brothers," he told her repeatedly. Opal not only learned the duties of running a farm and caring for the family, but went to the mines and learned how to set charges for blasting. One day her father put her in the driver's seat of a coal mine truck and told her to drive. She was scared to death, but he just told her to figure it out for herself. "I know you can do it, Opal," he said, and she did, barely reaching the pedals. Houses in Havre were few and far between. School was 5 miles from their home, which they walked to and from each day. A viaduct was built so children would not have to cross the busy railroad tracks. During the Great Depression in the 1930s, 25% of the U.S. population were unemployed. Riley made pennies a day, but they were thankful he had a job, a roof over their heads, and food on the table. Trips to the store were not made often, just when they were out of staples such as salt, sugar, and coffee. Eventually, the family moved closer to town in a framed house with a tar paper roof. They slept on the bare floors, even if the temperatures were 53 degrees below zero or above. At one point in her life, Opal spent 3 weeks in the hospital quarantined. It was the only time, Opal recalls, being in the hospital as a child, except when her mother was giving birth to Neva, and then 2 years later to Ava. At 16, Opal married a young Filipino who worked for the Great Northern Railroad, Anthony F. Piocos. Opal gave birth to their first child, Loretta. She was baptized in a Methodist church in Havre before the new family moved. The Great Northern Railroad transferred Tony to Great Falls, and Opal found herself miles away from her mother and father for the first time. A little over a year later, a son, Frank, was born to Opal and Tony. Then in 1939, Opal gave birth to their third child, Tom. They soon moved to Portage. Frank remembers the house had orange crates for kitchen cupboards, and his mother put curtains on them to give him a more homey look. During the 1940s, the nation came out of its depression. The United States was at war, and back home, women were joining the workforce more and more. The family returned to Great Falls and lived on the south side till the birth of their last child, Tony, in 1944. Shortly after his birth, they bought a house on the west side of town in Pig Alley, where they raised their family for the next 16 years. Opal worked as a waitress in several places until her sewing skills landed her a job as a seamstress in the Sears store. Eventually, she became the manager of the draperies department. Times were good. Opal's parents are now living nearby. Her father now worked for the railroad, and her mother cleaned offices. In 1960, Opal and Tony found their dream home on the Upper South Side. Their son, Tony, was now the only one left in the house. Frank and Tom were in the Navy. Loretta was married and starting a family of her own. In 1974, Opal was widowed. Retired now, she decided to travel and visit her children, grandchildren, sister, cousins, and various friends and family. In 1976, she married Salvatore Arcanapane. They spent much of their time traveling. Sadly, she was widowed again in 1985. Today at 90, Opal still lives on the Upper South Side in her home of 50 years. She still enjoys sewing, knitting, and crocheting. Many of her projects are donated to nursing home patients. She still gardens a little and loves the outdoors. She enjoys visiting friends and family. Today there are only 4 of her siblings left out of the 10: Roger, Lawrence, Betty, and Charlotte. They keep close track of each other and visit often. Opal loves the infrequent visits from children and grandchildren. Most live away from Great Falls. As of today, April 19, 2010, she has 4 children, 17 grandchildren, 29 great-grandchildren, and 10 great-great-grandchildren, with 1 more on the way. Opal May has never acted in a great play, or written a novel, or danced in a renowned ballet. She has raised a family the best she knew how. She has been a friend the best she knew how. She has been a supportive daughter and sister the best she knew how. As she enters the 10th decade of life, she does so the best that she knows how, one day at a time.